Well, all right. Good morning, ATA. Yeah, so it's good to be what I consider home after two tours at Pope and one of my favorite assignments as Command Chief at McConnell. It's great to be back at ATA. I want to say welcome to all of our distinguished visitors, General McNabb and General Miller. I think that's General Scobie. I can't really see. And to all of our airmen that are here, I want to say thank you for your trust and support in me and my team to get after the challenges that we have for all of you today. But I also want to say a special thank you, and I don't think the chief or the CMSAF are here, but I do want to say a special thank you to both my wingmen, actually both my bosses. They took a chance on me 2 years ago. So I clearly wasn't the obvious choice to be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, and they could have went in a different direction. But I'm actually glad that they did take that chance, and I'm even more happy that they provide me the support and the leadership that I need to get after the things to make all of you more lethal, better trained, better led, and resilient. They set the tone, they work very hard, and I'm actually proud of what we accomplished together. So again, they're not here, but I'd like to give both of them a round of applause. I also want to say welcome. I see Chief Caruso and my good friend Chief Williams, as he mentioned. We've been working together for a few years, and I thought I heard Chief mention that Chief Binking, our 12th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, is maybe somewhere in the building. So if you hear Chief, welcome, and thank you for all of the support and mentorship you provide me as well. So your theme today is Heritage, Heroes, and Horizons. And I believe any discussion about heritage naturally begins with the heroes that made this command what it is today. Heroes who had the courage to ask some very important questions, like, why not? Who else? And how? And so I'd like to talk to you about just three of those heroes today. Heroes like Staff Sergeant Roy W. Ho. Now, the first air-to-air refueling actually occurred on 27 June 1923. And after some early successes and then a few months later, a subsequent accident where the refueler pilot was tragically killed, the Army Air Corps scrapped this idea of refueling. Until about 1929, when a who's who of aviation pioneers showed up to take another whack at this air refueling thing. And on this particular mission was Major Carl Spotts, Captain Ira Eaker, Lieutenant Elwood Pete Quesada, Lieutenant Harry Halverson, and a little-known young man by the name of Staff Sergeant Roy W. Ho. Now, on this mission, they were flying a Fokker C-2 high-winged monoplane, call sign ? Outfitted with two 96-gallon fuel tanks. And what they wanted to do was to consistently and repeatedly refuel this aircraft without landing. And they were successful. It stayed in the air for 150 hours in a monoplane. That's more than 7 days. And this was obviously well before this thing we know today as crew rest. And they actually would have gone longer, but one of the engines began to fail. And our young Staff Sergeant Ho, he said, "Hey, I got this." Now this young man, he took off his shoes because the wings were slippery. He climbed out onto the wing at 5,000 feet and attempted to repair the engine at 5,000 feet while the plane was flying. And though he was unsuccessful in repairing the engine, Sergeant Ho and his crew, they made it back safely after their record-setting mission. But they answered the question of whether air-to-air refueling was a practical way to extend missions beyond the limitations of fuel capacity. They answered the question, why not try? Heroes like John L. Levitou, Airman First Class John L. Levitou, and he answered a pretty important question as well. Now, Levitou was a loadmaster who became another one of our AMC heroes, and he's also known as one of our Air Force Special Operations Command heroes. Now, most of us know about John L. Levitou because it's the highest award that you can win in every level of our enlisted professional military education. But I'm not sure that we all understand the story of how he came to be. Few of us actually know the details of the mission he was flying on 24 February 1969 over Vietnam aboard a AC-47 call sign Spooky 71. Now, as a loadmaster, Levitou's job was to set the ejection and ignition timer controls on the Mark 24 magnesium flares, the flares that you put out when you're taking fire, and then pass it to the gunner for deployment. Now, these flares were 27-pound metal canisters that burned at about 4,000 degrees. They illuminated with the intensity of 2 million candle power, and they would typically burn for about 2.5 to 3 minutes. So on this mission, Spooky 71 came under fire, and on the pilot's command, Levitou and the gunner started deploying the flares through an open cargo door. And while handing off one of the flares, the plane was hit by an 82 millimeter mortar shell. It hit the right wing, exploded inside the fuselage, and all crew members, to include Levitou, were pretty badly injured. As a matter of fact, he suffered a concussion and about 40 wounds on his back and legs due to shrapnel. Kind of more importantly, the blast, it jarred the flare from the gunner's hand and incidentally pulled the pin and arming this flare. So you have this flare that will potentially burn at 4,000 degrees rolling around on this aircraft, right around the ammunition bin with about 19,000 pounds of live ammo. So Levitou, he couldn't walk, so he actually crawled over to the flare, jumped on it, hugged it, drug himself to the back of the aircraft, and pushed it out through the open cargo door just seconds before it ignited. He saved the air crew and, of course, the airplane. John L. Levitou became the youngest service member, the youngest and the lowest ranking airman to receive the Medal of Honor on May the 4th, 1970. He answered the question, who else is going to save us? Heroes like Tech Sergeant Richard Patterson. In 1956, while airdropping building supplies into McMurdo Air Station. Anybody know where McMurdo Air Station is? In Antarctica, right. From C-124s. Now, while they were dropping these supplies, the parachutes began to fail. Nobody could figure out why the parachutes were failing. Patterson, who was an aerial port specialist, what we know today as port dogs, figure we get some of that. Patterson had 31 prior jumps. And he decided to parachute from, it was about 2,000 feet in this South Pole region to try to figure out, hey, what's happening with these chutes? Now let's think about this. The cargo parachutes are failing, literally falling from the sky and being destroyed on this icy tundra. And this guy says, hey, let me give it a go. But within a few hours, he had determined that the problem was a faulty release mechanism. And so his brave actions allowed the C-124 Globemasters to deliver about 24 tons of equipment and supplies that same day. And after implementing his corrective actions, they delivered the materials that assured the early construction of, get this, International Geophysical Year Station, a weather station in the South Pole. Sergeant Patterson answered the question, how? How do we fix this? Now, these are just a few of the enlisted airmen we celebrate as part of our Air Mobility Command heritage. We share their stories of courage. We name awards after them. We use them to inspire the next generation of courageous, innovative airmen. They're part of our lore, part of our history. Recognizing them is part of our heritage, but it's only one part. You know, heritage is a tricky thing, and it takes a long time to build a true heritage. One of the comments that I typically get is that, hey, Chief, we don't really have any Air Force heritage because we keep changing things. Now, I suspect that the folks that are here from the Bloody 100th or the Square Patchers from the 384th Air Refueling Squadron or even the Pelicans from the 14th Airlift Squadron, they would probably disagree with this idea that we don't have any heritage. But I can see where these individuals who say this because we change things, I can see where they're coming from. Since we came together as a team, the secretary, the chief, and we've made, I would say, quite a few changes. Gotten rid of some EPRs, gotten rid of some additional duties, AFIs, CBTs, revitalized the squadrons, empowered commanders. Hell, we even changed the uniform. This week, we changed high year of tenure for some of our enlisted airmen so that we can retain some of the talent and experience that we need, that we must have to build the Air Force we need, as our secretary talks about. So again, we're changing things, and there are more changes to come. And some think this takes away from our ability to build our Air Force heritage. But I'd like you to think about this from a different perspective. I don't think change is keeping us from building our heritage. I believe change is a part of our heritage. We were built on change. Before we were an independent service, Hap Arnold said, hey, let's change this Army Air Corps thing. And if you don't believe that change is what it's all about, just ask Esther Blake, the first female to ever enlist in the Air Force. Do you think she was okay before we made a significant change that allowed females to serve? Do you think our Tuskegee Airmen would have been content staying on the sidelines in World War II because they didn't want to rock the boat? Ask Chuck Yeager if he thinks we should have left that sound barrier alone. Ask any of our airmen that are breaking ground in cyber, remotely piloted aircraft, intel, communications, special warfare. Ask them if change is a bad thing when it comes to meeting the challenges that we all face on a daily basis. Change is what we do because we have to. The enemy is changing. The threats are changing. So it's only natural that we change to maintain our competitive advantage. So yes, we might tweak an AFI that determines who we bring in the Air Force. Our airmen might come in with a few more tattoos or a few more piercings than they did last year. We might change the AFI that allows us to retain more staff sergeants who will be responsible for training the next generation of maintainers or boom operators. But this isn't a sign that we're loosening our standards. This is a sign that we're changing to compete with the strong job market. We're changing to maintain the experience and that we've made these people experts in their particular fields. And we need to keep that experience where it belongs, on our team. And we're not doing this haphazardly. I hope you realize that. We take in the data, we analyze it, we make it work for our Air Force. We're doing what we need to do to maintain a lethal and a ready force. So speaking of change, what changes are on the horizon? So my boss, my wingman, he called me up just about 2 years ago. So that means I have about 2 years left as your chief. And what I really want to ensure is that I'm working on the most important things to ensure all of you remain resilient, well-led, and well-trained. So we'll keep working. We're about to change our basic military training to add more lethality and readiness, more training, more firing, more weapons training, more PT sessions. We'll move Beast Week until the end so that it becomes the crucible event. We're in the process of updating all levels of our enlisted professional military education to add more joint war fighting, and again, more warrior ethos, more experiential learning, and not so much what we all know as death by PowerPoint. But the most significant thing that I'll be working on for you in the next 2 years is a new performance management system. And I'm talking about from the time that you receive your initial feedback from your supervisor until the EPR is written. See, I think we have it a little bit backwards. Today, in our performance management system, and I'll certainly talk about our enlisted evaluation system, most of the responsibility lies with the supervisor. The supervisor is responsible for giving you your feedback. The supervisor is responsible for writing your EPR. The supervisor is responsible for conducting, writing your awards, and so on and so forth. I think that responsibility belongs to the member, and the supervisor is there to validate what you've done. I think we need to increase the frequency with which we provide performance feedback. And for a sneak preview and some insight into what our performance management system might look like in the future, I would ask you to take a look at a book called Helping People Win at Work by Ken Blanchard and Gary Ridge. Gary Ridge is the CEO of WD-40 and has done what I considered a masterful job in transforming their performance management system. I'll continue to work in our areas of resilience. What I found, and I've been to, I'm not quite to the end yet, but I was out on the West Coast visiting, I think 7, maybe 8 bases. And I got a chance, just like I do when I go to every base, to sit down and talk to our professionals in the resilience arena. And just as I suspected, lots of great programs. And so what I want to do is work with our A1Z team, General Martin and his team, to make sure that we have a repository where all of you can go to and understand what resilience programs are available and make them work for your particular wing. I don't know that as an Air Force we should be in the business of creating some big program and laying it across the Air Force and saying you must do this. Many of our wings are different. Many of the communities that they reside in are different. And you should be able to tailor your resilience programs to the ones that work best for you. Again, as always, what I ultimately want to get after are all the things that make this, I hear a lot of people say it's a great time to be in our United States Air Force. I want to get after those things that equate to lethality and readiness so that we can all pay tribute to our long, courageous heritage of not being afraid to make the changes we need. Ultimately, I want to be deserving of the commitment, the loyalty, and the perseverance of the greatest group of people I personally have ever known, to include our airlifters, our air refuelers, our aeromedical evacuation teams, our contingency response teams, and all the flavors of professionals within each one of those functions. Our mobility airmen, our American airmen. And in the words of our 21st Chief of Staff of the Air Force, be bold, go long, I got your back. Thank you.